In the last few episodes, we've been talking about and sharing our experiences, personal stories, and specifically in episode 4, we talked about our opinions when it comes to what we think the foundations that need to be inserted within our respective communities, both separately and united, simultaneously, to strengthen the grassroots peace building field. And we know we promised to bring more terminology and more fact checking. So here we present to you an entire episode that no segments. Sorry to say that there are no segments, but the terminology and the fact checking are going to be infused within this entire episode. So it's basically an episode about those 2 segments. But in order, we loved recording the previous episode, and because it was such a flowy conversation, we decided not to actually make separations, but have it like a very natural conversation. So
I think there's a lot of especially now because we have the war going on, it becomes even more of a challenge because we're not only talking about terminology and the everyday status quo that we live in, but now there are more terminologies that are coming out because of the war itself. So the terms become part of the discussion, become part of the debate. I mean, again, going back to our third narrative, in my opinion, the whole argument of trying to put whether or not certain things are under a certain framework or a certain term, it's more for the moral compass aspect. Even for if we say fact checking, even, concerning, and I had an interview recently in a media outlet, and they literally asked me about the hospital bombing. So you're the support of Palestine, yes? I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, are you on the Palestine side? I said, I am on the side of peace, and I am Israeli and Palestinian. So no, I'm not on one side. They're like, yeah, you want peace. But when it comes down to it, you're for Palestine, yes? I said, again, I am who I am, and I'm both. Take it or leave it. It's what it is. But I think the attempt by media is to portray 2 sides, and it's only in order for a pro-Israeli. It's a show. It's a show in our lives, and pro-Israeli Western person can basically fill his moral. There's an aspect of morality that he needs to feel how it's morally okay that he is pro-Israeli. So he wants to hear those things from the Israeli side of the debate. And then someone who's pro-Palestinian is supposed to get those from the Palestinian side of the debate. Each one is filling the whole missing in the morality aspect of how can I justify at the end of the day, how can I justify that I'm pro-Israeli versus pro-Palestinian? And that's, I think, is part of the problem. But again, terms are there and they exist, so we need to tackle them.
And they exist for a reason.
And for a reason. So we need to tackle them. We need to talk about them. The overall problem is that we are nitpicking with the terminologies. I think it becomes a game of how can I dispute one term over the other, and that disputes the whole argument of one side over the other. I think that's the problem in the argument and how it's done about terminology. But if you analyze it and if you open it to all its multi-layer, I think you can find more understanding of each one.
And when you keep in mind that an actual solution is what is required from the conversation, you might actually let go or overlook the term that's used. Don't not put effort into correcting the terminology of the person in front of you, but overlooking that and actually focusing on getting onto a solution. Because we said it before, you said it before, you don't make peace with your friends, you make peace with your enemies. You're obviously not going to agree on terminology, and I think that's the simplest thing that you are going to disagree on.
The simplest term I can say is Free Palestine, for instance. I think that's it becomes a question of, okay, sure, where, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot of people ask that question on the reverse side. So great, let's talk about that. If we're pro-peace, we can discuss what does Free Palestine mean to you and to vis-a-vis someone who is pro-Israeli, and you should ask him what does he believe by Free Palestine. For me, Free Palestine is free Palestinian people.
Yeah.
It's an independent state alongside the state of Israel because we need to live in peace in this place. Because I think if it's a free Palestine to take the whole land, that won't happen. And there won't be a Palestinian people to get a land. if we only use the means of violence, because it hasn't worked for 85 years,
Mhm.
and we need something. We need something different. That's just my view.
Okay, so before we delve into actual terminology and take actually give our take on the terminology that's being thrown out there and actually dissect it and give our opinion on it and why we sometimes use it or don't use it or agree or disagree. Let's talk about what this terminology leads to. Let's talk about our stories on what the use of this terminology has brought up on into both our specific personal lives, but also our society as a whole. I'm sure pre-war and during this war, you have gone through or heard of many stories of discrimination, both from your people and towards our people. Do you have anything that comes to mind?
I mean, we talked in episode 4 a bit about how we, as the Air 48, need to be the grown-ups
Mm-hmm.
in this scenario, and we feel that pressure of we can't say things and others can. So that is a form of discrimination in that way. When someone says something, radical against the state or against the Jewish people as a people, I mean, which is obviously wrong, they're arrested. But why isn't it the same treatment to a Jewish person who says death to Arabs,
Mm-hmm.
which actually is also enticing to give us probably the most dangerous thing, by the way, for the state of Israel's existence is a civil war. Is
Mm-hmm.
more, it's actually more dangerous than a war with Gaza. If you ask me strategically about existential threat, that happens from within. And if this state want to realize this, we're doomed. In my opinion, we're doomed. If we're gonna still have that segregation, and if 20% of the population after 75 years of being part of the state and about 65 years being full citizens of the state don't feel fully don't feel that the state is also theirs in one form or another, it's the failure of the state. And it's discrimination that it's both inherited in the system, but it's also personal discrimination
Mm-hmm.
of people. I mean, I definitely, throughout my life, there's so many examples that I can think of where I was discriminated against. I think the first one that comes to mind is being called when I was a waiter, and it was an American that I was on the table, like treating the table, servicing, and he goes to my boss and says, Ibrahim is amazing, all these things, and she says, yes, Ibrahim is a good Arab. What the hell does that mean?
Good Arab.
So okay, I'm a good Arab. So what's the regular Arab?
Yeah.
Bad?
So you're the exception.
That's what it insinuates,
Uh-huh.
that he is the good one out of those people who are inherently bad. That's what you're saying. And I was like shocked. I didn't know what to say. But immediately the guest said, no, he's a good person,
Yeah.
not a good Arab. Now I was filled with such appreciation to that person. And it was a Jewish customer, by the way, Jewish American. And I will never forget that moment. That he also stood up and fixed that wrong terminology
Mm-hmm.
to try to change. But in general terms, I think I try to not see it.
What do you mean?
I mean, when you look for it, you see it more.
The discrimination?
Yes.
So you try to not see it? That makes sense?
I try to live my life normally.
Uh-huh.
I try to treat people equally,
Mm-hmm.
but not with suspicion.
Yeah, that's your responsibility.
I feel like when you look at the world with suspicion and trying to find out where are people looking at you with a weird look or a certain look while you're speaking Arabic, for instance, you'll find it. But you don't need to look at these people who are in the background. Like, it's not somebody who's interacting with you. But if you're walking in the street and someone turns their head because you said something in Arabic and you take offense, you decided to be offended. While neglecting it, I think at times can be in a way better. And this is the life. They should accept that we exist. And it shouldn't make us feel intimidated
This
or
is this
looked
is
at in a different way. It's like my own way to combat it. I feel like if I search for it, I'll find it way too much. There's no need. It exists.
this
I
is
know it
exactly
exists.
this is exactly what I was talking about in episode 4 about you saying that it's our like we have a big burden on ourselves to show people. What I was saying is that what I was saying was exactly what that customer did in the restaurant. Speaking up for it, putting people, not ignoring it. We can choose to turn a blind eye to it, but when it comes to the other side, quote unquote, other side, the people that aren't Arab, when they hear it, it's their responsibility to call it out.
It's mutual, I think. Everybody's responsibility.
Absolutely,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
But I expected less in general from someone who's not an Arab than an Arab, I guess. Because it's like, at the end of the day, it's about us, you know? At the end of the day, they're talking about you. So
No,
it's first and foremost your
we're
responsibility.
talking about the quality about we're talking about the quality of life here for both of us. The responsibility, you might disagree, but the responsibility, and we're not going to recreate the conversation that we had last time.
Yes.
But the responsibility lies on both, and we can't expect less or more for any either side. I think we should expect best, just human fucking decency from both.
I mean, that for sure. There's no argument about that. That's what the first thing that we need is human dignity and accepting each other on normal, just on a human basis, for sure. It's
I
just that I always look at what I can do first and foremost before what
Now, if the
somebody can
if the
do.
entire world worked that way and everyone was looking at them and how they can improve, then this place would be amazing. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way, and we need to call out responsibility where it needs to be held.
Unless one's a prime minister, but sure, go ahead.
Um,
As we suggested last episode.
I wanted
But I,
to talk about
yes,
like for me.
because I did want to ask. That's simple. One simple example from someone who lives in the north, right? And there are a lot of them. Um, but in your situation, it's completely different.
It is completely different, especially right now when we are not just supposed to blend in or expected to blend in. We right now want to, because the trouble that comes with standing out as an Arab or as a Palestinian in Israel is something that us as Palestinians don't want right now. Like we want just a peace of mind, leave us alone from police and from citizens. We don't want or at least I would
Interrogations
assume,
and questions
yes.
and
But with that blending in makes us also witness to what is done and what is said when an Arab is suspected not to be in a room. So I was during the beginning of the war, the first week. I again don't look like ethnically ambiguous for lack of another term. And there was a siren, and we all rushed, like a bunch of random people. We all rushed to a shelter, and then I hear this old lady, talking in Arabic, and I'm like, first of all, she has balls. Talking in Arabic, like in the beginning, like first 3 days, first 3 days. I had my mouth shut the entire time because I did not expect what was going to happen. I didn't want to be seen as an Arab, and I also did not want to be seen as a Jew because I was like, felt like no one
you could be attacked on both
yes,
sides.
like I have a target on my back from both. And then I hear this old lady talking in Arabic with her son. Her son is old, like her son is like an adult, and she's an elderly lady, and she starts speaking in Arabic, so I approach her. And I like ask her, and I was like, "Are you okay?" in Arabic. "إنت منيحة?" And I tell her خالته, like I talk to her, and then she was like, "You speak Arabic?" And I was like, "Yes." And then she asks me, "Do you speak Hebrew?" And I was like, "Can بتخ, I do speak Hebrew." And then she was like, "Okay, it's easier for me to speak in Hebrew." And then I was like, "Okay, speak in Hebrew." And then she was like, "At Arabia? Are you Arab?" And I was like, "Yes, I am." And then it's like, "لما تموسي متزه. Why do you do this to us?" And just
Why
to
do
paint,
you?
yes, just to paint a picture, sirens are on top and rockets are on top of our heads. Both of us are in a shelter at the moment, and she's asking me, "Why are you doing
Yeah,
this?"
Mira, why are you doing
Now,
this?
in my head, I was like, "Okay, hold a second, ma'am. I'll call my cousins. I'll tell them to stop." But in reality, I told her, like, don't you see that I'm taking shelter from the same threat that you are taking shelter from? So this terminology comes from, like, don't want to say in this specific situation, like she's a sweet old lady, but this use of terminology just makes us all as one, and it's extremely dangerous. And I want to share another example, but I want to
Hit
give
me.
you also the
No, no, no.
platform if you want.
This was fascinating. Please give me another one.
Another example was I was with a few friends, and we same thing. There was an azaka, there was a siren, and we ran to the shelter, and we were at one of my friends' apartments, and we ran to the shelter. Of course, all the neighbors went down there also, and one person that was walking her dogs outside ran with her dogs inside, and then one of the people. One of the neighbors was saying, "Is it كيف שיש לך كلבים? So thank God you have dogs. Arabs are terrified of dogs. No Arab would come here because you have a dog." And I'm sitting in the corner, petting the dog. It's like, and then it continues. He continues to say, ما لو رأيت العربيين من يافو, you didn't see that the Arabs from Yafo, they started walking around in this neighborhood. It's just like, and this is like the discrimination that was behind closed doors with no Arab. Technically, they thought that no Arab was in sight. And this is an Arab. This is not a Palestinian we're talking about. Now, yes, we can talk about the similarities and how they overlap and whatever, and how people identify for days. But at the end of the day, when it comes to inside of Israel, Arab is
They
less
portray
threatening.
us as
Arab,
Israeli
yes.
citizens at the end of the day.
Arab is threatening, but it's less threatening than Palestinian. Like Palestinian is like when
With us is more distrust.
yes, it's distrust.
From
Palestinian
Palestinian
is
is more fear.
yes.
I think that's a bit of the, like, how you can, summarize the difference of the two sides. Yeah.
And even on our platform, we had one comment that was shortly deleted after, by the person who posted it, that I told you about, that you're not Arab, you're not Palestinian. You're either Arab or you're our enemies. Like Palestinian is not just a threat, it's an enemy. When you say that it's an enemy, that means you put effort in removing this threat.
And as I said, that's the problem that exists, and we mentioned that last episode, the problem of definition of how a Palestinian is perceived as a terminology. It's perceived as a political entity, mainly using terror to remove this country and make a new one. That's what a Palestinian is in the eye of a regular Israeli, not knowing and not digging deep into the conflict, into and exploring our culture truly. When they do, they can see these things that we're talking about.
I want to take it to the other way also. Like the excuse that is sometimes valid about, like they raise their children to hate us, or they raise their children to kill and eradicate Jews. What do you think about that? What do you think about that?
What do I think about raising someone to hate someone?
No, that Palestinians raise their children. Like there's this famous quote from Golda Meir that says, "We can forgive the Palestinians I'm going to butcher this. We can forgive the Palestinians for killing our children, but we cannot forgive them for making us kill theirs," or something within those lines. And she also has a quote of, "There can't be peace until the Palestinians love their children more than they hate us." What do you think about that?
I don't think necessarily a Palestinian grows up and teaches his kids, listen, we have to hate Jewish people. But your reality, your experience, your surrounding, your society, everything about it shows you why the other side is bad. So how are you supposed to love it? You can't love the other side. And I think that's, a ridiculous claim to, like, a Palestinian from Hebron is supposed to love Jewish people out of the goodness of his heart without anything. Like, it makes no sense. He lives in horrific conditions. Why would he? Like, where would that love come from without you approaching him? He approached, like, You can't just expect people to have that feeling,
Yeah.
and it's crazy to me. But and I mean, and listen, there are also Jewish people who are like, there are Palestinians who are raised to hate, and there are Jewish people who are raised to hate.
Yeah.
It exists on both sides. I remember watching, it was I think it was kind of a documentary. They were talking about bringing these Israeli kids to the military museum,
Yeah.
and we were talking to them about, like, oh, they were seeing all these tanks and things, and you would see a 12-year-old in front of the camera saying, yeah, I want to grow up to be a soldier and kill as many Arabs as possible. Where the hell did he hear that sentence? How did that formulate in your mind? Of course you heard it from someone else. Of course it's the environment. It could be the home, the environment. It could also be that someone related to him got killed by an Arab.
Yeah.
And vice versa to a Palestinian by an Israeli soldier, by a rocket, by whatever it is. But when you suffer from the other side, of course you're gonna develop these feelings of hate. Like, I don't understand how we're supposed to.
The way I look at it, I'm like, okay, let's acknowledge the suffering. Let's acknowledge the fact that there is incitement, there is hate, if not just in the education system, but also in the society itself. But let's put ourselves in the shoes of a Palestinian, either in the West Bank or in Gaza, or even in East Jerusalem, when they're looking about their future, they're looking about their fate, and they start to acknowledge the Jewish relationship to the land, the indigenous relationship to the land, which is extremely difficult for a Palestinian to acknowledge, by the way, and vice versa. They, with acknowledging the existence of Israel, they have two options: one state, two states. One state. No, and I repeat this almost each and every episode, I don't think it's in the benefit of anyone in government or the majority of Israel to have a one state that has everyone's citizens and it's democratic and there's voting, because at the end of the day, look at the stats, Palestinians are the majority. If we vote and agree to that, it'll end up being Palestine.
It will end up in civil war.
It'll end up civil war, but let's say that it's not civil war, and it'll let's say, okay, civil war or a Palestinian state, neither of which an Israeli wants. Sababa. The other solution is a two-state solution. And okay, we go through a two-state solution, which is technically the path that we're in right now, the status quo, the limbo that we're in. We look at the situation of Gaza. We look at the limbo of East Jerusalem. We look at the settlements that are expanding and expanding. We look at the settler violence that's happening not just right now. This isn't a new phenomenon that's happening in the light of the war. This is something that has been happening for years. We look at the expulsions that happen in East Jerusalem, in Sheikh Jarrah, in Silwan, in whatever, regardless of the fact, like everyone sends, like put more detail, regardless of the fact. This is what the Palestinian individual sees. He sees that his presence here is not realistic in these both scenarios. The one-state solution and the two-state solution. What option does he have? These people don't want me here, so I will combat in the same way. If they want to eradicate my existence in the name of a one-state or two-state solution, either with that ending in civil war or with settlements that will end up annexing the entirety, that's like the full...
Why would a two-state solution not be something that a Palestinian would want?
That is but what do they see, Ibrahim? What do they see now? Like, let's say you sit down a Palestinian...
Because there's no two-state solution, in my opinion. That's like...
They don't look at it. They look at it as something that it's impossible and that it's not what Israel wants. They don't
Of course, both sides don't want it.
Yes.
In my opinion. Like, if we're looking at a lot of the resistance to the two-state solution, it makes both sides not fully willing. I think at the end of the day, if we look at the entirety of the Israeli population, entirety of the Palestinian population, we'll see too many people on both sides not willing to compromise.
Yes.
And it's not because they feel that they're going to give up.
Yeah.
And it's not giving up, it's compromising.
Yeah.
And like you said last episode, that's the thing that people need to check. Like when you talked about we both need to sit in our corners, that's the answer we need to provide, in my opinion. What kind of a state do we want?
Yeah. We interrupt this episode to express our heartfelt gratitude to our supporters and our Patreon members. Without you, we wouldn't be where we are today. So this is a reminder that if you join our Patreon community, you will have access to exclusive content and you will be the first to know when we have something going on in your city. So That is your reminder to join the Patreon, and you can do it with the link in our description. Thank you so much for your support. We appreciate it a lot.
Are we willing to compromise or not? And if we as a people decide that we're not willing to compromise, it's a problem.
It's a problem, and I'm going to say something harsh, but you make a decision and you take the consequences of that decision.
We will be doomed as a people.
Yeah.
Like, it's plain and simple. Every time and we mentioned it before, every time we went to a conflict, our people lost two things: more of the land and more of their rights.
Yeah.
So what else are we looking for in order to be completely obliterated? I don't understand. And speaking of obliterated, we'll talk about one really hot term that everybody is arguing about, everybody's discussing, everyone is like trying to figure out the term genocide.
Yes.
And a lot of people discuss it, particularly in Western media, and trying to, again, analyze whether or not it's considered a genocide.
And right now, if you use that term, you're automatically segregated as pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel.
Yes, also, that's another part of the problem. I mean, let's put it this way. I'm not even sure what they're going to think about it here when we talk about it, even though we're talking about it from really an analytical point of view. Because using a term, particularly a political term, cannot be used on emotional basis. I think that's the first thing that we need to look at.
Agreed.
Emotions can't take part in analysis, in hardcore analysis. It doesn't work like that. What is genocide? Genocide is the obliteration of whole people, or the attempt to, without any segregation, without any restraint, without putting any difference between any of the people, and for the objective of wiping them out and eliminating them. But that's the objective. The question is, and then it becomes an issue of interpretation. What does Israel want?
Yeah.
And that's where the argument can form for some people. Does Israel want to wipe out the entirety of the Palestinian people and within, at the bottom of its heart, or not? But I mean, I think it's a ridiculous question. If Israel's trying, like we know, if Israel's trying to wipe the entire Gaza as a people, it can do it in 2 days. It doesn't need three. It doesn't need a month.
It could have happened on the 8th or 9th of October.
Yeah, it doesn't need a month. But in Israel's pursuit of trying to, as they say it, wipe out Hamas, they're using acts of vengeance. They went to war against Hamas after the Hamas terror attack, and that war, because of the brutality and the vengeance aspects that we're seeing in the hard bombardments of Gaza, that it turns from a war to genocide, because you're bombarding and you're not doing knock on the roof, which Israel used to do, a small little bomb to make a noise for civilians to evacuate. It's not being done. There was the entering to the a lot of things that are like being questioned in terms of international law, and it's a challenge to try to figure out what is right and what is wrong. But at the end of the day, when you go this much blindly, you are obliterating the people. Effectively on the ground. That's what's happening. Over 11,000 people. But I mean, again, don't forget, Gaza's 2 million, 2.2. If there was a genocide, we would see tens and tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands in a month, which we're not seeing. So we're seeing elements of genocide within a war.
Yeah.
It's how war, because one side is defeating the other. And if the side who's winning goes too much all the way, it becomes two elements of genocide.
Yeah.
I think that's the issue that we're seeing right now, and that's what should be discussed.
It's disregarding the
with the collective punishment aspect.
Collective punishment aspect. It's completely disregarding the margin of collateral damage. It's disregarding, including their own hostages.
Amira, come on, the hostages have become collateral like damage at this moment. The one hostage that was rescued, the IDF soldier, it was by miracle.
Yeah.
They just luckily found her when like they did not know. So yeah, she could have been collateral
It's
damage.
completely like the powers that be are driven by hate and revenge.
And we hear it from soldiers.
Yes, and we hear it
It's
from
not
soldiers.
something what me and you are making up
Yeah.
from our own fiction in mind.
Or analyzing it. No, we're hearing
it from like, from people on the ground. And I mentioned my like example of a friend who talked about, that he's hearing voices within the army right now of people, in the Gaza Strip saying, we want to kill Arabs. It's not even Hamas or Palestinian, it's Arabs.
We're seeing musicians come out to lift morale for soldiers, and they're saying, get back
to Gaza.
Go back to Gaza, wipe out Gaza. In the songs, in the chants that they're giving, wipe out Gaza, bring back the settlement that I always butcher the name of.
Abu Ghosh. Gush Katif.
Gush Katif. So we're hearing these from singers, from influencers that are coming to boost morale for the soldiers, and they're using this terminology, they're using this mindset, and it's being cheered by all the soldiers that are attending, that are actively going into Gaza. And at the end of the day, there is no commander on top, or I assume there is no commander. I'm not finished with the sentence.
Oh.
There is no commander on top of each and every soldier's head, looking at how they're, not just like what they're doing,
yes,
or what they're saying. There is no, it's unrealistic.
There are rules, but you can't expect each and every single soldier to follow each and every single rule and to be cold-blooded and rational. And I'm sorry, what if his cousin got attacked on October? Like, he could be looking for vengeance. And to not think that this could happen, it's also, how can I put this? When we talk about morality and the morality of the army, you're making us look like we're a bunch of devils and you guys are the saints. No, there are no saints in humans. I'm sorry. Humans have feelings, including feelings of vengeance, of payback, of also attacking and hurting others. That's part of human nature, in my opinion. Okay, now we actually just, for our listeners, just by the way, we just had a short little break in the middle of recording, and actually our editor approached us, and he was listening to what we were just talking about. And we have a Jewish Israeli editor, and he was talking about that it was difficult for him to hear some of the things that we said, all the issues about the situation in Gaza, about whether or not we're going for vengeance and stuff like that, because in his eyes it's not about going for vengeance. It's about making sure you're protecting yourself. Mm-hmm. I think for us, the view is, okay, after you secure the border, for a lot of Arabs, okay, you secure the border, what do you need to keep going in for?
Yeah.
In an Israeli Jewish eye, it's not only about attacking Gaza, and that's what he was telling us. It's about, if you show weakness here, you will have the same thing happen from Syria. And not only from Gaza, it could happen from the West Bank, from Syria, or from Lebanon.
Shows weakness.
Shows weakness on our military strategy ways. It's ineffective, and that they, as a people, feel vulnerable, and that they need to show strength in order to maintain their own security and to maintain their own safety. But I still challenge that, because how much aggression will actually benefit us? Because we used aggression in the past. Israel used aggression in the past. We had 3 full military operations in Gaza in the past. What did it achieve? Hamas still exists. We still have terror attacks. We still had October 7th. Mm-hmm. And the situation hasn't really changed from these 3 operations. How are we, how does the state expect a Gazan kid that was born after 2008, after putting the blockade on Gaza, to grow up loving Israel? Like, I don't understand that. We and I'm saying we, as a state, as the Israeli state, did not offer any exits, any other paths for a Palestinian in Gaza Strip. We know people that took it, we're talking about some brilliant people that took them years to exit out of Gaza. Years and years, because they need IDF approval. And it took them so long to get out. Israel didn't offer another option to the Gazan people. It was comfortable locking them inside a little box while they're physically far from us, away from us. We have a perception of peace. But in the same time, you're putting these people without any other path, vision, anything in life besides this terror organization that you are aware and you are saying that this is terror organization, but you had no problem putting them with them. And basically Hamas was the only thing that existed in their lives. It's the one that provided education, it provided food, it provided employment, it provided every single element of your lives. Who else provided you anything else? Who else gave you a light of something, a path, a direction, anything? No one. You're locked in this side of this box. And Israel hasn't done anything to improve your life. You're seeing this box built by Israel. So of course that hate will increase. And of course people will recruit to Hamas. Like, we built the biggest recruitment camp for terror in the world. And this is not the solution.
I think our editor was talking more about a short-term solution and what's happening right now, and you're more talking about a long-term vision.
Yeah, but even in the short term, how much can we bombard, like how much as a state is expect to bombard Gaza and reaching the results at once? The result at once is to eliminate Hamas as a controlling body. It can do so. And it probably is, that's where it's trying to do. But why wiping out most of Gaza and not offering any solutions? Ask anyone in the army right now, what happens in the quote unquote the day after? No one will give you a real answer. They don't know the answer. And that's the problem. They don't have answers for the long term. You can't do short term without long term vision behind it. Like what? We're going to get stuck with this piece of land that has no governance, and then there's the state is going to stare at it and see, okay, it's time to think of what we should do. No, it doesn't work like that.
I'm going to do something that I like to do a lot. I'm going to play devil's advocate.
Hit me.
And I'm going to tell you what should be done. Let's say we give you the chair and you're prime minister. What should be done? And we're agreeing here, all of us, that Hamas can't be a governing body and must be eliminated, must be removed from the situation because it has shown to be a threat to both Israeli and Palestinian civilians alike. So what must be done?
I mean, at the moment, it's inevitable that the state will wipe out Hamas's capability to govern Gaza.
No, I want to go back to the 7th of October. What do we do as Israelis? What do? We want to ensure our
as a state.
Yes, yeah.
On the 7th of October.
On the 7th of October.
I mean, first of all, the state secured its borders for the first probably around 3 days. The Israeli border wasn't even secure. The operations weren't mainly done in Gaza. There were some bombings in Gaza, but the majority of the work was trying to secure the border because there were still so many people inside Israel. So that was the first part. And then there was attacking in Gaza, which every military would do. But then the question is, how much is enough? That's the question. It's not whether or not an army should go in.
But
an army will go in.
Yes, but we're saying
how
now.
Much?
Okay, we're saying right now that yes, there's a sense of responsibility and accountability of that. The growth that Hamas has reached up until this point has to do. I think I can say primarily because Israel keeps on keeping it like a little bit, so it goes and grows, just to maintain that separation that we talked about between PA and Hamas, and because of benefits that political benefits that Israel would have in the existence of a terror organization. So if we're saying that, and we're saying, and now you're saying until when, and we're agreeing that it must be eradicated and we don't want it to grow. What do we do?
So we do a few things. While the army is already eliminating a lot of Hamas's governing capabilities,
okay,
you don't allow it to grow in again. Because Israel, what it's done, you're already inside.
Okay.
And you're already controlling right now the kind of like, the situation at the moment. And Israel will continue to control this situation for a while. What it needs to do is to strengthen the PA, to provide another alternative, to agree with the world that the PA should be at least changed. But you heard what Prime Minister Netanyahu said. He said he will not give the Gaza to the PA. So what do you want? What do you want, Bibi? What do you want? What do we do with Gaza? Like, he's not giving answers, and he doesn't want to turn it to the PA either. Sure, I agree that we shouldn't turn it to the PA with the current PA, but there's no even vision of creating a better PA. Why? Because the state and the government, particularly this current government, is happy that the Palestinians
Yeah.
are divided, is glad that the Palestinians are not able to, won't be able to control, have a stable governance in the West Bank, and it won't be able to control Gaza Strip, because it eliminates a partner for negotiations of a solution to this conflict. That's all part of the problem. It's
Yeah.
all of these things together. It's not just one.
I think we can talk about problems and faults and mistakes that both have made forever. Me personally, like we can also go on an analytical aspect and talk about where the aspects and elements of genocide appear within the war or after the war, and analyze the intentions of the Israeli government, of what they are doing. But at the end of the day, I honestly don't have an answer of what should be done and what's the best short-term solution. I can philosophize on the long-term solution and what I think should happen a lot. And I do think that we are right in a lot of cases, but right now I really don't know. Like, I'm at a loss on what should be happen. Like, I have my heart torn between not even two, like 1,000 pieces, between the civilians, the peace builders, Israelis, friends, families, and you have the West Bank
and the kidnapped, and
then the kidnapped, and it's just, and this is a word that the West hates. It's so complicated. Like, it's so complicated. It's not simple. It's not black and white. You can call out a certain scenario and situation that happened and say this is black and this is white, this is right and this is wrong. But when you look at it from the bigger picture, it's really complicated. Like, I hate to break it to everyone that's listening outside. And now let's move into, like we talked about, genocide before. We mentioned the word apartheid, ethnic cleansing. Now I think we can both agree, and tell me if I'm wrong, that these elements are there, whether in East Jerusalem, whether in Hebron, whether in the West Bank, in Gaza. We can see those things happening, of buses only, or locations. I personally
on apartheid
in particular. I personally was in Hebron, in the Jewish portion of Hebron, and I was stopped and I was asked. I was with a Jewish friend, and I was asked, "Are you Muslim?" And I said yes. And then he said, "You can't be here. You need to go out." And I was like, "I want to buy water." He was like, "You can't. You need to leave." And then I said, "I'm an Israeli citizen." And he said, "You're Muslim. You need to leave. And there are buses that I can't take. There are places that I can't be. Even within the mosque, it's like separated." So elements of apartheid exist. And I want to follow that up with elements within Israel that negate apartheid, where there is democracy, where there is equal opportunity and equal rights exist. But the existence of the good does not make the bad and the shit less bad.
I think, there are two prime examples of talking about elements of apartheid. It's like you said, in Hebron. Hebron is like, it's a divided city. People need to understand, half of Hebron is Palestinian, half is Israeli.
Yeah.
And you can't cross between the both sides. And obviously, because the military control is Israeli, so the upper hand is Israeli. And then the lives of the simple Palestinian citizens is very, very restricted. And, you go through checkpoints and pass, and people use different buses. We see full segregation in those things. The other place that we see elements of apartheid is your communities.
Yeah.
Is Arab 67, Jerusalemites, where you are a resident and not a citizen.
Yeah.
You have certain rights. You can get an Israeli ID and a license, but not a passport. You can vote in the municipality, but not in government.
And you pay taxes.
And all this while she pays full taxes.
I think we shouldn't. I'll end this portion of terminology by saying that all these terms that we're using, genocide, apartheid, ethnic cleansing, when we talk about them, we need to be extremely, because we're talking about them removed of emotions. So we need to continue the delivery of our sentence removed from emotions as well. Like, you can't say that you can't reference the genocide, the ethnic cleansing, the apartheid to the Jewish people. You can't say that because something that is done by the IDF or by the Israeli government, that means it's relevant to all and apply to all Jews. That has been right now and in the past increasing severely the anti-Semitism around the world.
Yes. It's
And
putting everything in one Jewish box.
same for Islamophobia. One
Absolutely.
Arab is a terrorist, that means all Arabs are terrorists.
Yeah, and I think that's just one thing that I would want to like follow up with you on is that we need to be careful with terminologies because of the problem. I think of, like you said, don't bring emotion to the table. And because I see that with our own community, Arab 48, because the word apartheid is used so much in the pro-Palestinian camp, it talks about apartheid everywhere.
Yeah.
It's not clear about issues of, or as we say it, elements of apartheid in two specific locations. And then I would hear people who are Arab citizens in Israel, Palestinian citizens of Israel, talk about apartheid in Israel. I don't think we have an apartheid. I think we have discrimination in Israel, for sure.
But also be clear, what are you
Like,
talking about?
For sure we have discrimination, systematic and discrimination between people because...
And when you say in Israel,
Okay.
you mean 48 Israel?
I mean 48.
Okay.
Because we are full citizens. We vote, including in the elections, we can get even elected in government. But it doesn't mean that we are on full, on equal footing on every single level. We're not. But it's not apartheid. We're not forced to be in the back of the bus. I'm sorry. We're not forced to use different bathrooms. It's not even the segregation of the black people in the US. Like, it's a completely different thing. And to put our experience in the same words as a terminology of something so severe is a problem from our side.
And it diminishes or undermines the suffering that we go through. It does more when you come to the table and say this is apartheid, the counter argument is going to be presented, and then not apartheid next.
Yeah, so your discrimination is invalid.
Disregarded, yeah.
So instead of just talking really about there are actual discrimination, including systematic, it's not only between people. It's including systematic discrimination. How many towns in Israel, Arab towns in Israel, have been established since 1948? 0. Not a single one. Not a single new Arab town has been built in this country since its establishment. That shows you all you need to know. Well, obviously, while hundreds of different Jewish ones were established since then, we weren't allowed to expand. We weren't allowed to even start new, build new communities. And with those new communities, actually, good things could happen.
Yeah.
We can create new visions and new culture from the younger generation. But if I'm stuck in the same village, that it's a completely conservative village forever and ever, that young generation is not going to break the culture or the conservative culture of the village. But I want a different lifestyle. So why can't I do it and create a new dynamic with other young Arabs in our own city? Why do I need to come to your city? To a Jewish city in order to live that life? Why can't I build it and create it as part of my culture? And then actually we're both going to be like relatively closer in terms of culture in a secular way. At least that's something that I could personally relate to. So discrimination systematic also exists, and we need to understand which term we use for what.
Yeah.
I think that's
And where.
And that's the most important thing. But there are things that are absolute, like the term terror.
Yeah.
When we talk about Hamas, people ask, is it a freedom fighting versus is it a terrorist organization? Look, at the end of the day, when you have a people that is not a state, they want statehood. They use different methods and means in order to reach that statehood. One of the possible tools that you can use is terror.
Yeah.
It's terror. It's to draw fear, is to make the other side change their policies and ways in order to create something for yourself, and it's for political gain. And what Hamas has done is using terror, uh, uh, using terror in order to make that point. The only
Terror as the
problem,
means.
terror for the as the means for the goal.
Yeah.
The only problem also with Hamas that I personally have, it's not only that it's using terror. It's not only just that it's acting with terror and killing innocent civilians for that goal, which obviously no innocent civilian is for me the means for the goal. But it's also that it's a radical religious ideology that expands beyond the quote unquote regular terror means that we've seen in the past. Meaning, if we look at the Northern Irish and the terror that was done back then, it was just for the nationalistic aspiration. And at the end, they got independence of northern part of Ireland.
Yeah.
But Hamas expands beyond Palestinian nationalism. It's a religious ideology that expands from the Muslim Brotherhood that looks at a much bigger picture of Islamic new Islamic Arab world revolution or something. So that also is something that I completely disagree with, because your aspirations are not just solely Palestinian nationalistic. It goes beyond, and you are using terror as a means. Say that you're being a freedom fighter, in my opinion, I disagree with. And especially from, as we said, from a group that bluntly said live that they are not responsible for their own people. How dare you?
Whose freedom are you fighting for?
How dare you? If you're just fighting to fight and not to protect these people and to who the hell are you fighting for? It's exactly that's the right question. Who are you fighting for exactly? But it's important also for some of our listeners to remember other things when it comes to terror. That terror was used in the past, and it was used and
was this is initially defined as terror and then defined as other
things. And one of the biggest, especially because we live in Israel, it's a lot of the times the word terror is portrayed for things that have to do with Arabs and Muslims. And need I remind some of our listeners that the Haganah, a Jewish militia, was established in order to grant the Jews independence from the British mandate. They used terror attacks.
Yeah.
The Haganah in 1946 did a terror attack on the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, killing 91 people.
Yeah.
That was also a terror attack that killed civilians. It was a lot of. It's a hotel. Who led the Haganah? Menachem Begin. Who's Menachem Begin? He's the 6th Prime Minister of Israel, and he is the one who established the Likud party. So then he became a legitimate figure. So it is a question. I think it's a question that needs to be asked in general in the world. The thing is, history is written by the victors.
Yeah.
So you define what things are. But me, as Ibrahim, as a peace activist, use of terror as a means to a goal doesn't help. It won't help, and particularly for our case, it won't help. It will only terrorize us at the end of the day. We will suffer. It's these terror organizations thinking they can affect our reality. They're only making it worse.
They're increasing our suffering.
Exactly, and that's the biggest problem of the means that they're using, of them thinking that terror is a right strategy. It's proven false, but they're still insisting to continue to do it, which makes our lives even more difficult. Look, it's important, to emphasize one thing, that when we talk about discrimination, we're talking about racism. It's important to emphasize that we're not talking about, that it's discrimination is something that only one side feels and one side only discriminates, or that one side feels, being targeted on a racist elements, or they are being racist. Racism, discrimination, looking at yourself as a group versus another group and looking at differences rather than similarities, and how I am part of a tribe versus another tribe, it's a human nature.
Yeah.
Humans look at how I'm related to some and different than some, and try to relate with some and exclude others. That is human nature, and it creates, and it's embedded in us to create racism and discrimination. The way to combat it is to accept that the different is not bad.
Yes.
But we, as a mashallah, as a human, as a species, haven't done that since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
So I'm not very hopeful that this will change in terms of it being something natural of humans, because all of us can be racist, all of us can discriminate, and all of us can feel racism against us and discrimination against us. It's not one versus the other, and we can feel it within our own community.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's human nature. As soon as you enter a room, you make the distinguish between me and them, us versus them. As soon as you start a conversation, as soon as you enter the room, whether that's male, female, black, white, Arab, non-Arab, Jew, not Jew. And we also do it within our own societies. There's a lot of discrimination between Arab 48, 67, both of us against West Bankers. It's a derogatory term. من الضفة.
Dafawi.
Dafawi. We say
As
like
a little
a West
kids.
Banker.
Yeah.
As little kids, we
I
say it as
remember.
if we are better than them. And us as Jerusalemites, we would look at Arabs from up north, 48 Arabs. We would say, Ahl al-Shamal, they think they're better than us. Like we would say that. It's like discrimination.
Yeah. I same, like for me, I grew up with that like word like that people use, and it's like such a normal thing that people say Dafawi. And I only remember when I was a little older and I started to understand a bit more, and I'm like, I'm confused. Why the hell do we use that term as a derogatory against our own people? Aren't we fighting because, like, aren't we struggling to find a way that our own people can have dignity and live in their own state? So why are we looking at them as less than? And the same, by the way, we do with Jerusalem. But with Jerusalem, it's different.
It's different. I think you guys look at us as if we are closed-minded.
There's that
Stubborn.
closed-mindedness and
Closed-mindedness.
elitistness in a little way.
Elitistness? Like, what do you mean? Like we think that we're better than all or above
Yeah,
all?
like,
we look at the same. We say the same about you.
It's so funny.
Like,
Feel like we have the same. No, but it's like that. Because they're from Jerusalem, they think they are the Palestinian people, or like they're better than others.
even though half of us are from Hebron. But yes, it's a natural. I don't even know if to say natural, but it's
Unfortunately.
an unfortunate. It's an unfortunate trait that all human beings have, and we need to keep it in check.
And by the way, don't get me wrong. It's not like it's only us that do it and the other, others don't. We see it with our own peers, with the Jewish society. We live in Israel.
Yes.
So we see how discrimination can also happen within the Jewish community itself to the Jewish community. Also, the Jewish community talks about, being discriminated against in the world and all these things, but they discriminate each other. Looking at a Russian Jew as someone who is, calling a Russian little girl a slut. I'm sorry, like it's a horrible, but that's a racist thing that we hear happening in Israel. Or looking at Yemenites and just in general Mizrahi Jews, people that came from the Arab world as less than. And it was definitely true back in the day when they started moving into this country. They were put in the worst places. When they were, when they made their aliyah, their entrance to the state, they put them in the worst places that they could. The better ones were given to Ashkenazis, to European descendant Jews. Arab Jews were looked at less than. And actually, in order to combat the racism against them, because the European Jews told them, "Oh, you're Arabs."
Yes.
Because they spoke Arabic.
Yes.
They didn't speak Hebrew.
And then they dropped the language.
So they dropped the language. They dropped even the culture in a lot of the communities to a certain degree.
Yes.
And I think it's resurfacing now. In the last 5 years, we're seeing a resurface of the pride of the Moroccan, of the
and
Yemenites.
because of the Abraham Accords.
I think the Abraham Accords played a big role in that now there's a resurface of the pride. But back then, they refused to speak Arabic. That's why if you look at their descendants, kids our generation, they don't know the language. They don't speak it.
The Israel was close to the region, but after the Abraham Accords, they had a link to go back to the roots that they have in those locations in that land, whether that's Morocco, specifically Morocco, actually. So,
and even they didn't speak the language. The farthest person for a lot of them is either the oldest aunt, and for sure the grandma. But a lot of the parents, even they, like the grandparents that moved with their kids, the parents of our friends, they try to prevent the kids from speaking Arabic. They try to make them only speak Hebrew, to be as Israeli as possible. Why? Because if you're not, they think you're Arab, which is us, our community. They don't want to be confused with those Arabs and looked at less than as Arabs. So what did they do? They were even more racist against Arabs to show, hey, with all due respect, we're Mizrahi Jews, we're Jews. And those Arabs that you talk about, we hate them even more than you do. And that was a mechanism, a self-defense mechanism, is to portray the racism and discrimination against someone else in order to protect yourself.
And that shows us how strong terminology can be and how careful we need to be when using certain terms. And now, to sprinkle a little bit of fact-checking to our episode, we want to add something very light, very silly, I have to say. Of the people that I get on my social media and on that I see on other people's social media, those of you from the West that are sitting very comfortably and claiming that the state of Israel is the one that committed the atrocities against their own civilians in order to justify raiding Gaza and bombarding Gaza and eradicating Hamas.
I can't believe that's even real.
I don't have anything smart to say to something that is very stupid. I'm sorry. It's like you can't, I can argue and bring statistics and bring opinions and experiences to someone who wants to listen and someone who's actually bringing valuable factual points to the table. But when someone comes and brings someone from the outside comes and tells me what happened, I just can't take it seriously.
It's that demonization, though.
Yeah.
It got to a point that you think the other side is such a monster that it's even willing to do this. When you create that demonization and you amplify it to that position, in the mind of that person, this monster in his head is capable of doing anything. And that's the problem. And I'm glad that we're here to dispute all that. And we're saying it as Palestinians.
Yeah.
These things happened. People died. So many people, including Arab citizens of Israel, Palestinian Israelis.
Even from the kidnapped.
Including people from East Jerusalem, including Bedouins, children, elderly, women. These are real people. These are not imaginary. And it's not me and my cousins who took them to our backyard. They were kidnapped in Gaza, for Christ's sakes, by a terror organization. And to say that this is fake or that the state would burn its people to justify war, what the hell is wrong with you?
We need to say, Ya Jama'ah, there's enough atrocities and horrible things that have happened. You don't need to make shit up. There's enough horrible actual facts. Stop putting and making up, what are they called? Instagram infographics for other people to fuel other people's hate. One, there's enough real news. You don't need to make things up. Two, it's not what we need to get to. It's not us, people from on the ground here in Israel and Palestine. We don't need that. We don't need that at all. And I know this episode was probably very hard for whoever is, we touched upon many points.
Many points.
And we probably pissed off a lot of people from many
all
sides. Yes.
All sides were not comfortable. But that's why this podcast is called Unapologetic. And we're going to say our views. And
sometimes you're going to like it. Sometimes you're not. But we thank you for your time. And we thank you for your compassion to actually sit and listen to us.
And for allowing us to bring you the world from our eyes.
Yeah.
And thank you for trying and making the effort to really look at the world from our eyes and to understand the complexity from our side, because that plurality and understanding of complexity from all different angles is what will get us to a better place than we are today.
And to quote Ibrahim, at the end of the day, Arabs, Jews, Muslims, Christians, and Jews, we all deserve better.